R/stories. I witnessed my mom killing my dad. I grew up in a remote village in Africa where life was all about farming and herding livestock until some American missionaries came and opened a school for the local children. The village men and elders hated this because it meant all the kids, except the girls, would have to leave their homesteads to attend school, leaving all the chores undone for the day. My mother, on the other hand, was overjoyed with the idea because she had heard stories from other women who their sons had attended school and how successful they had become later in life. So, there was always bickering in my home about how this education is getting in the way of more important stuff like grazing the cattle and goats. My father always went on and on about how the cows are getting thinner and producing less milk because there's no one to feed them properly. About 1 year later, after all this happening in my home, my father had had enough, so one morning he ordered me to bring all the books I had and my uniform, a torn-out pair of shorts and an oversized shirt. He wrapped them all together with the books and threw them into the fire. He then forced me to go take out the bulls out to the fields just beside the school so I could see the other kids in school sitter in class learning. He tried to convince me how useless sitting there was. I was so hurt I cried all day. When my mother learned about this later that evening, she was so upset, and for the first time she physically dared to attack my dad, but unfortunately he was too strong for her. She was severely beaten and kicked out. A few days passed and she was brought back by her parents, my grandparents, and instructed to never repeat what she had done or else she would be kicked out for good, and if she was to be kicked out again, she was welcome to her parents' home either. Grandpa was so mad because that would also mean that he will have to return whatever cattle was paid to him as her dowry. She was on her own from there. Things went back to how they were before the missionaries, and I was back to herding livestock and plowing the farms. I was so depressed as I watched other kids doing school stuff or talking about stuff they had learned while I just sat there awkwardly dying inside with envy. Then one day everything changed. I had just came home when my mother called me, and by her demeanor I could tell something was off. She was sweating and shaking. She instructed me to take a calabash. It's a gourd from the calabash tree used as a bowl, cup in African homes. Fill it up with milk and bring it to her. I did as I was told, but after handing it to her she turned around and started to vigorously shaking the gourd. They handed it to me and asked me to take it to my father after the milk inside had settled because it was foamy. I took it to him after some minutes and went about my business. I was alerted by a loud wail from the back of the room where I used to sleep. I ran outside and it was my dad. He was on the ground. My mom was standing right beside him, hailing curses at him. He was so stiff, his eyes yellow and foaming in the mouth, and he had soiled his pants. At that point he and I knew what was going on. He looked at me, the back at my mom, and said something in my native language that literally translate to, "You have killed me, you whore." He died and was buried a few days later. I went back to school, and throughout my life I have never talked about it. My mom is now old, but still I cry whenever I think about what she had to do for me to have a different life. Love, sacrifice, forgiveness. I'm sorry you had to see this. Where are you now in life? I'm okay. I work for an airline as a ticket sales agent. Also doing my master's, was supposed to graduate in December, but now I'm unsure because of the quarantine. I am glad you made it through all this and still a healthy, good man. What are you up to now? I have a good job and a family of my own. My dream is to become a commercial airline pilot.
Bye bye.